The dirt road leading to Blackwood was long and winding, flanked by ancient trees whose branches intertwined overhead, forming a natural tunnel that blocked out sunlight. For anyone driving along it, the world seemed to shrink to shifting shadows and the muffled sound of tires on gravel. Blackwood didn't appear on any modern map, yet it still existed, like an open wound in the middle of the forest. It was a place where time seemed to have stopped, and dark stories hid like predators lurking in the shadows. Luke Holt didn't want to be there, but work demanded it. As an investigative reporter, he was tasked with uncovering mysteries and exposing them to the world, and Blackwood promised to be a goldmine. For weeks, rumors about unexplained disappearances had reached the newsroom. People who ventured into the forest around the village vanished without a trace. Local authorities avoided questions, and the residents who remained wouldn't speak to outsiders. Luke knew something was wrong, and he was determined to find out what. As he entered the village, he noticed how the place seemed both abandoned and alive at the same time, as if something unseen was watching him. The houses were made of weathered wood, with slanted roofs and windows that looked like dead eyes. A faint mist hovered over the streets, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. His first stop was the local bar, the only one with lights on. As he entered, he was met with suspicious stares. Men with wrinkled faces and women with blank expressions stared at him in silence. The air smelled of cheap alcohol and cigarette smoke. "You're not from around here," said the bartender, a burly man with graying hair and piercing eyes. "No. My name is Luke Holt. I'm here to investigate the recent disappearances," he replied, trying to sound casual. The bar fell silent. People averted their gaze, and a few stood up and left, as if something terrible was about to happen. "Listen," said the bartender, leaning over the counter. "If you know what's good for you, leave before sunset. There are things in Blackwood you don't want to know." Before Luke could respond, an old man at the corner table spoke, his voice raspy like breaking twigs. "They won't let you leave. The shadows don't forgive." That night, Luke stayed at the village's inn, a small and decrepit place. As he reviewed his notes, he realized something was off. There was a strange sound coming from outside, like something scratching against the wooden walls. When he opened the window, he saw nothing but the darkness of the forest, and for a moment, he was certain something was watching him from within the trees. Luke woke early, determined to explore the forest. He had heard about a clearing where, according to local legends, strange events occurred. With a backpack full of equipment and an audio recorder, he followed a narrow trail winding deep into the woods. The forest was oppressive. The trees seemed to close in around him, blocking out the sunlight. Each step made the silence heavier, as if the environment were swallowing him whole. He heard distant noises, the snapping of branches, the sound of leaves being crushed underfoot. No matter how hard he tried to ignore it, the feeling of being followed was inescapable. When he reached the clearing, he saw something that took his breath away. In the center of the open space stood a stone altar covered in moss, marked with carvings he didn't recognize. Around the altar, melted candles and small bones, like those of animals, were scattered. He approached, taking photos and recording descriptions. A sudden gust of wind brought with it an acrid smell of burning. Luke turned sharply and saw a figure in the shadows. It was tall and indistinct, with eyes that glowed like burning coals. He stepped back, but the figure didn't move. Then he heard a voice, low and drawn out. "The pact is sealed. You are part of it now." Luke ran, his heart pounding, without looking back. When he finally reached the trail leading back to the village, he tripped and fell, tearing his pants and scraping his knee. But he didn't stop. When he reached the inn, he locked the door to his room and tried to calm himself, but the figure's words echoed in his mind. In the days that followed, Luke tried to speak with the villagers about the altar, but they either ignored or avoided him. Only one person was willing to talk, the old man who had warned him at the bar. "You found the altar, didn't you?" the old man asked, his voice heavy with resignation. Luke nodded, and the old man sighed deeply before continuing. "The altar is the heart of Blackwood. That's where it all began. Long ago, the village founders made a pact with something we don't understand. They wanted prosperity but didn't realize the cost would be the village's soul. Since then, the shadows have guarded the pact. And now you are part of it." Luke tried to argue, saying he hadn't agreed to any pact, but the old man just laughed bitterly. "It doesn't matter. Just seeing the altar is enough. You've been marked." That night, Luke noticed the shadows in his room moving. They stretched along the walls and ceiling, growing and taking on human forms. He tried to ignore them, but the fear was unbearable. When he finally fell asleep, he dreamed of the altar and the figure watching him from the forest. In his dream, he heard the same phrase, "The pact is sealed. You are part of it now." Determined to break the cycle, Luke returned to the altar with tools to destroy it. He believed that if he eliminated the heart of the pact, the shadows would lose their power. But when he arrived, he found the place surrounded by hooded figures murmuring in an ancient language. Luke tried to hide, but one of the figures turned in his direction, as if sensing his presence. Suddenly, the forest fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. The shadows began to move, enveloping him like a dark tide. He struggled to escape, but they were relentless. It was then that he saw the old man from the bar among the figures. He pulled back his hood and said, "There is no escape, Luke. You belong to Blackwood now." Before he could react, Luke was pulled into the altar. His vision went dark, and all that remained was the sound of sinister laughter. When Luke woke, he was back in his room at the inn, but something was different. The village was empty, and the shadows now followed him wherever he went. He realized he had become part of Blackwood, trapped in an endless cycle of fear and darkness. From that day on, Luke was seen only as a shadow among the trees, a warning to those who dared to challenge the pact. And Blackwood remained as it always had been, a place where dark secrets are kept, and where the pact can never be broken.